Welcome, and thank you for joining us this evening for our Family History Month program, DNA Demystified, a guide to cracking your genetic code. I'm Pam Taylor, manager at the Harford County Public Library's Joppa branch. This performance is being recorded and will be available, along with a handout, at hcplonline.org on the HCPL Universe page through February 28th. Now let's get on with the show. We're thrilled to have a new speaker with us this evening, Jamie Lee McManus Mayhew. She has such a passion for genealogy. Jamie is a California native with deep Southern roots, a speaker, family genealogist, genealogical educator, occasional blogger, and professional researcher. She is active in numerous societies and organizations, currently serving as the president of the APG Writers SIG, a director of the Genealogical Speakers Guild, and the director of Oakhurst, California FamilySearch Center. She holds a BA in sociology, an MA in educational technology, and a professional learning certificate in genealogical studies. Jamie will be using a PowerPoint during her presentation this evening, and you can adjust what you're seeing on your screen by using the screen view in Zoom. Please feel free to submit questions via the Q&A feature in Zoom, and at the end of the show, I'll get to as many of them as I can. And we'd really appreciate it if you could take time to complete the quick survey that comes right at the credits. We use your input to choose topics for our virtual genealogy program, so it's time well spent and just takes a moment. Thank you so much. And now it's my pleasure to introduce Jamie Lee McManus Mayhew.
All right. And are you seeing the whole screen at this point?
We're not seeing your slides yet.
Of course you're not, since we did this tech check and it was working and now it's not. So let's try that again. Okay, just a minute.
For those of us that are snowed in, it was a beautiful sight.
Do you see?
I can see presenter view now.
Presenter view. Do you see the whole thing now?
I just see your slide.
Very good.
I think you're good to go, Jamie.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Certainly.
And I'm happy to be here to talk to you about DNA Demystified. And hopefully, some of you have thought about doing your DNA. And you really want to know a little bit more about what it is and what's it about and how do you go about doing it and what will you get as a result of testing your DNA. So tonight, we're going to, on our agenda, be talking about why people do take DNA tests. What is DNA? What are the main three types of DNA tests? Who can take each test? Who sells each test? What do you get when you get your results? How can you use what you get? And a DNA strategy. Why do people take DNA tests? Well, the first thing is they may want to discover their ethnicity or their genetic admixture. Find out where their ancestors were from. They might want to discover that ancestral homeland. They might want to confirm previous research. Make sure that you are related to who you think you're related to. They may want to find cousins. They may need to break down brick walls. They may have specific questions that they want answered. They may want to research an adoption, or they may want to learn medical history. So what is DNA? DNA is a shortened verb or word for deoxyribonucleic. I stumble over this every time, and I said it about a half a dozen times. Deoxyribonucleic acid. And that's why we call it DNA, because it's a tongue twister. It's the material in our cells that carries genetic information. There are 23 pairs of nuclear chromosomes called autosomes in each of your cells. They kind of randomly number them from the largest of those chromosomes down to the smallest. And then the last pair, the 23rd pair, you get one of two types. Those are your sex chromosomes, and that 23rd pair is either two X chromosomes or an X and a Y chromosome. You get your chromosomes one strand from each of your parents. So your father, a male, has an X and a Y chromosome. He can pass on either the X chromosome or his Y chromosome to his child. Your mother has only two X chromosomes. They're different, but they are both X chromosomes. So if the child gets an X and a Y chromosome, then they're going to be male. If they get an X and an X chromosome, they're going to be female. So a little bit more biology. During reproduction, the cells split, and you get about 50% from each parent. The chromosomes also recombine, so you get different parts of each chromosome when they split. They don't split down evenly, and you only get the same piece for every child. They would recombine, and you get different parts of that chromosome. Siblings do not get the same 50%. That's how come your sibling might have brown eyes and you have green eyes. They might have red hair and you have blonde hair, because your DNA, although you each got 50% from your parents, it's a different 50%. This is a kind of simplified diagram of a cell structure. You'll see that in the center, you learned this in high school when you studied your biology, is the nucleus of the cell. Inside that nucleus is your autosomal DNA. Outside of the nucleus, swimming around in the cytoplasm, is the mitochondrial DNA. So how are these going to work? All right, you have basically two types of pedigree charts. You have a pedigree chart, which is a genealogical chart. In that chart, your first generation has you and then your two parents, your four grandparents, your 8 great-grandparents, your 16 great-grandparents, your 32 great-great-grandparents, and your 64 great-great-great or third great-grandparents. Sometimes, though, that's not what your chart looks like. Sometimes your chart may have two people here who are the same as the two people over here. Because they're the same, by extension, all of these people are the same as all of these people. That's called pedigree collapse. You don't have as many different individuals in each generation. If this happens often enough, then it's called endogamy. Some religious groups are very endogamous. They've married within their group over and over, so that you have a situation that looks like this, but repeated over generations. And then you will get more than expected DNA from each of your ancestors. We're going to assume that There is no endogamy or pedigree collapse. And to simplify things, we'll be talking about it as if all of these are different people. So let's first look at Y-DNA. Y-DNA is a paternal test. From before, you remember that your father is the only one who can pass down Y-DNA. So that Y-DNA test tests your father's 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 line. It can only be taken by men. And in our Western culture, we frequently call it a surname test because we pass down the surname primarily through the father's father's line. So your 23rd chromosome is that sex chromosome. The men give either a Y chromosome or an X chromosome to each of their children, and women give one of their two X chromosomes to their children. So this is the type of combination you can get from your sex chromosomes and tests through Y-DNA. Why should you take this test? Well, you'll help you find out about your earliest paternal ancestor. You can test two men to determine if they're related on the paternal line. What's the worst that can happen? Well, sometimes you get no matches. If you come from a place where there has not been a whole lot of people who tested, you may not get matches, but usually you do. Other than no matches, sometimes you can find a non-paternal event or a group of matches where your new surname does not appear and you don't recognize any of those names. Who sells this test? Family Tree DNA is the only company that sells a Y-DNA test. Over the years, they've changed the way they've sold this test. They test what's called markers. And right now, as of January, they are selling a 37 marker test, an 111 marker test, a big Y 700 test. And you can see the current prices. These things go on sale. And you can start with that 37 marker test. The more markers that you test, the more specific it is. And you can then upgrade if you later want to, using the same test that you submitted to Family Tree DNA. So what do you get? This is from my husband's test. We tested him back 10 years ago in 2015. You get your matches. You get your ancestral origins on your paternal lines, the haplogroup, and what's called SNPs for your paternal line, matches maps, migration maps, and then some results like SNP maps and haplogroup origins and YSTR results that are more detailed, and you should probably take another class specifically in Y-DNA to learn a lot more about those. So here's an example from my brother. I had to test my brother because I don't have Y-DNA. You can see at the top here that when I first tested him, they had 12 marker tests, 25 marker tests, 37 marker tests, 67 marker tests, and I then upgraded to 111 marker test. These are results at 67 markers. You get the person's, what they tested. This person who is the closest match only tested 67 markers, while this other person tested a big Y 500 and then updated it to a big Y 700. So you can see what test they tested. You can see the steps, the number of steps that there are difference. Those are changes in those markers. And usually you're going to want to look at 3 or less, because you're going to see why you would want to stick with one marker. It gets very difficult to see how you're related. If I had tested the big Y, it would show here. I have not done that. It shows his haplogroup. Haplogroups are related to where the Y DNA originated, and RM269 is a very common European haplogroup. This second one has a different haplogroup, but it really isn't a different haplogroup. It is just a refinement of this M269 haplogroup, because this person and this person here both took that big Y700, while this person down here has that same M269 haplogroup because he only took the 67 marker test. Information over here is self-generated by the person taking the test. They can put in what they feel is the origin, the country of origin of their paternal line. They can put in the earliest known ancestor that they know on their paternal line. Now, my maiden name is McManus, my brother is a McManus, and this second person's earliest ancestor is a McManus. But this third person, his earliest ancestor is a Snipes. That's something you might want to investigate. In this case, this is an adoption that happened, and they are really McManuses. So you would want to consider and look at only a distance of 3 or less, and you look at your haplogroups, and they'll give you information about where your Y DNA came from. There are also surname or haplogroup projects, and we'll look at those. This is something else you will get, and it's called a time predictor, and you can see why you don't want to look farther than your third genetic distance. Craig, my brother, and this unknown, and this unknown McManus are predicted to be have a common ancestor that was born between 1600 and 1900. That is a 300-year gap. They predict or estimate that this ancestor was probably born somewhere around 1800. So if I were looking at somebody who has 7 markers difference, you can see how huge a gap there is at 67 markers and how difficult that would be to find out. So how do you use this test? Well, here is a person down here on the right. At the top are his great-grandparents. The family right above is his parents, his grandparents, then his great-grandparents. His great-grandparents had 2 sons. Those sons had 2 sons, and those sons had 2 sons. So now we're looking at 2 men who are related by their great-grandparents, and by testing both of them, they should be within that 3-step match, and will have the same haplogroup if they are truly genetically related this way. There are projects such as McManus projects. There are haplogroup projects that are going to be much larger haplogroup projects. If you go into a surname project, there are some experts there who can help you work with the matches that you have and help you determine some of the how you're actually related to that person. Mitochondrial, or mtDNA, is that mitochondrial DNA that's passed down from mothers and fathers, but only, and both men and women can take this test. It will test the mother's line. So if I test, it will test my mother. It will show me relationships down through my grandmother, my great grandmother, my great great grandmother. Surnames usually change in this case. And the one thing about this test, it tests those lines. It doesn't follow the surnames. It's best used to compare two individuals because mitochondrial DNA is very stable. It doesn't change very quickly. So you will be very closely matched with someone who might be hundreds of years before you that your two common ancestors are. But what you could do is if you had two people who you want to know whether or not they descend from sisters, you could use a mitochondrial DNA test to test that. Who tests with the mitochondrial DNA? There again, only Family Tree DNA does a mitochondrial DNA test. And they have a number of reports. I personally have never done a mitochondrial test because it is not as useful for genealogy as the other tests. What do you get? Well, since I haven't tested, this is from a sample that they give you, and you can see on the demo kit the kind of things that you get from your DNA match. You get that list of matches. You should only consider exact matches because once it gets past the exact matches, it's very distantly related. The haplogroup can be useful. Autosomal DNA, ATDNA, this is what most people are talking about when they're talking about doing their DNA test. It's called a family finder for some companies or a relative finder. It tests those 22 pairs of autosomal DNA. It can be taken by both men and women, and it tests both sides of your family reliably about 5 to 7 generations back. That's to your 3rd to 5th great grandparents, and that's really pretty far back. What does it measure? Well, they call the measurements centimorgans. They're not like inches. They measure a period of recombination, but the numbers themselves are useful for comparing people. The higher the number, the closer the relationship. So let's look at the shared DNA of some of the people you might not have been able to test. Your father or mother would share with you about 50%, not exactly 50%. It might be 49-51. It might be 49.5. That would be about 3,400 centimorgans. Your grandparents share half of that, or 25% of your DNA is shared with your grandparents, about 1,700 centimorgans. Your great-grandparents is about 12.5%, or 850 centimorgans, and great-grandparents is about 6.25%, or 425 centimorgans. Probably none of us have great-grandparents or great-grandparents that they're testing, but we do have siblings, aunts and uncles, and cousins. Our siblings, like our parents, share about 50% of our DNA, and that's about 3,400 centimorgans that you would share with a sibling. Your aunts and uncles will share about 25%, or 1,700 centimorgans. First cousins are 12.5 or 850 centimorgans. Third cousins, 1.56% or about 73 centimorgans. So you can see as it goes down and your cousins are more distant, you will share less DNA. So who are your cousins? Well, let's look at this chart. Mary has married two men. First, she married John, and she had two children, Susan and Grace. After John died, she married William, and she had a son, Samuel. So Susan and Grace are siblings. Samuel is their half-sibling. Susan and Grace have each had a child, and Samuel had a child. These children are first cousins. James and Joyce are first cousins, full first cousins, and William is a half first cousin. Maggie and Jack are second cousins. They share a great-grandparent, John and Mary. They are half siblings, or half second cousins with Sally. Linda and Mark would be third cousins, and they would be half third cousins with Susan, and Brianne and Jacob are fourth cousins and would be half fourth cousins with Anna. What's this stuff about removed, though? And what if you're not of the same generation? What if you're looking at two people who are not the same generation? So you had your siblings and your first cousins. If we look at James, who was in the first cousin generation, and we want to see how James and Joyce's son, Jack, are related, they are first cousin once removed. James and Susan are half first cousins twice removed. You use the earliest cousin relationship, and then you count the number of generations, their distance. So James and Jack were one generation different, so they were once removed. William to Sally to Susan is 2 generations, so they are half first cousins, twice removed. There's a lot of charts that show you this, but one of the ways you can look at one of the charts here and see how the DNA relates to all of those cousin relationships. What you'll see here, I told you before about the percentages and the number of average DNA centimorgans that would be that how you would be related. So you and a first cousin, this is you, would be related to your first cousin on average by 866 centimorgans. But there's really a range. And this shared centimorgan project was created by Blaine Bettinger a number of years ago, and he collected DNA information where people had known relationships, and they created this chart out of thousands and thousands of relationships. So your first cousin may not be 866 centimorgans difference from you. They can be any place between 396 and 1,397 centimorgans. So there's a range there. If you were to put in this tool the number of centimorgans, and I put in 47 here, that relationship could be a half third cousin, a third cousin once removed, a half second cousin twice removed, or a second cousin 3 times removed. You'll see there's a 29% probability that it is one of these relationships. There's a 27% probability, not much different, that 47 centimorgan match is one of these relationships. There's also just a little bit less probability that it is one of these relationships. It's very little probability that it is a second cousin or a first cousin twice removed. If you saw this page and scroll down, you would see this graphic. And what it does is it highlights all of the possible relationships that you could have with a 47 centimorgan match. And there are a lot of them. And when you look at them, you're going to see that some of them have a 0. And this is going to tell you that you might not be related to someone at these levels. You might not be related to a person who is your 4th cousin at all, genetically. An important thing to think about when looking at your autosomal DNA is your most recent common ancestor. This is how you are related to that person. Those first cousins shared grandparents. Half first cousins only share one grandparent. Fourth cousins share great, great, great grandparents or third great grandparents. You count the G's. If there are 4 G's, then you're going to be fourth cousins. Fourth cousins will be related to 4 G's. Fifth cousins will share a great, 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 great grandparent or fourth great grandparent. It's a little hard, but there's a lot of charts that'll show you how this actually works. Lots of companies sell this test. Family Tree and DNA sells a test called Family Finder. This is the current price for Family Tree's DNA. Over Christmas, all of these companies had sales, and they were on sale. But they'll go on sale again. One of the nice things about Family Tree DNA is it will allow you to test with another company and download your DNA and upload it to Family Tree DNA's Family Finder. You can test at Ancestry DNA, 23andMe, or MyHeritage, and for free, you can upload it. Or you can pay $19 and you get more information, additional tools. And $19 is pretty cheap as compared to $79 for doing a new test. This is as of January of 2026. Now you see the little picture here. This test is a scraping test. It is, you scrape the inside of your mouth, and that's how you would give this test. And that is something that's important to think about when you think about what tests, because if you're testing somebody who is older, they may not be able to do a spit test. They may need to do a scrape test. So we'll look at each of the tests and which ones are spit tests and which ones are the scraping test. Who else sells this test? Well, 23andMe sells the test. They are a spit test. And they sell right now 2 different kinds of tests, just a basic ancestry test and an advanced ancestry with health test. 23andMe, when they first started, they were primarily for health reasons. And a lot of the people in their database took their test because they were testing for inherited health conditions. You can still do that by paying for their advanced ancestry and health test. And that's on sale right now. MyHeritage DNA is still on sale from December. They're only $33 right now. They're a scraping test, and they will give you free shipping if you order 2 tests. You can also pay an extra $19 and you can get traits added to your DNA test. And this is from a lot of questions that they've asked people. And they'll ask you whether you're an early bird or a night owl, or whether you, have your family is long lived or they've died early. And they do a lot of different traits that they show through your DNA test for that additional $19. Ancestry is the big guy. Ancestry DNA was on sale over Christmas at $39. Their regular price, which is what they have right now, is $99. They will go back on sale. They have sales usually around Mother's Day, Father's Day, sometimes around Roots Tech, which is a big DNA or genealogy conference coming up. You can also get, for a little bit more money, you can get their DNA, ancestry DNA traits, plus traits. This as a spit test. So what do you get when you do these tests? Well, Family Tree, they're all going to give you matches, and I'm going to show you how those matches look different. This is Family Tree DNA, and these are my results. At the top, you'll see my first match, who is my brother. We are both tested. Well, he tested on Family Tree DNA because I tested him with a combo package where we did his Y DNA and his autosomal DNA. And then I transferred my DNA from Ancestry to Family Tree DNA. So we are both here. It shows that he took the DNA 67 test, that Y-DNA 67 test in addition. So I could look at that. If I didn't know who he was, I'd know that I could find that. It shows here the ancestral surnames that these people have in common with me. Not in common with me, I'm sorry, that they have added that they have ancestral surnames. We can see their haplogroups. There is a Y haplogroup here and a for each of them. And if they had done mitochondrial DNA, it would show. It shows their estimated range of a relationship. My brother is a full sibling. This person here, who shares 315 centimorgans with me, is estimated to be between a first cousin and a third cousin. I'd have to work on that. This one, who shares 279 centimorgans with me, is between a first cousin and a third cousin. I'm going to show you some of this because you're going to see where my brother is up here sharing 2,760 centimorgans with me, and the next closest person is 315 centimorgans with me. You can add notes here. You can click over here and add notes. You can connect to my heritage to have a tree. You can contact or try to contact your matches to see if you can figure out how you're related. You also, on Family Tree DNA, get a chromosome browser, which shows how you are related to that person, on what chromosomes you are related to them on. You also will get you're in common with or not in common with. I don't know how not in common with is very useful, since most of the people out of my 484 matches here that are in common with this man David, there are thousands that are not in common with David. So it shows I have a match with David, And David and I share some common matches, and this is very helpful in figuring out how you are related. My brother, Craig, also is related, has a shared match with David. This, whoops, I hit my P here. William is another one who shares with David and I. Samuel shares DNA with David and I. Over and on the right, you'll see X match. We're not going to talk about X matches. My brother and I do have an X match, but it's a little deeper to go into today than we really will have time for. You can export these lists and keep them. You can sort them by paternal and maternal lines. It also gives you your ethnicity. On family tree DNA, they call it my origins. And this is what my DNA origins look like on family tree DNA. You'll see that I'm 100% European. I am not very interesting, except possibly this little bit down here, which is less than 1%, that came from Southern Congo Basin and is probably a migratory uh, relationship. But interestingly enough, and I'm going to point this out on each one of them, it shows me as being 39% Scandinavian. Now that would surprise me because I don't have any known ancestors that are from any Scandinavian country, but most of them are from England, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland, and Germany. All right, 23andMe is another company. It's one of the older companies that tests for autosomal DNA, and it gives you DNA relatives, which are your matches. These are my first 4 matches. One of the things that's different with 23andMe, we talked about the percentages. They give you your results in percentage shared, not in centimorgans. So Lawrence and I are predicted to be second cousins, and we are 2.27% shared DNA over 12 segments. Those are those little parts of the chromosome. Miles and I are predicted to be second cousins once removed. Ruth is predicted to be a half second cousin, and Susan is predicted to be a half second cousin. If I looked farther on the page, this shows how that second cousin relationship has shared great grandparents. So Lawrence is in my family tree. I've created a family tree on 23andMe, and I have put him in there. It also, with 23andMe, shows you relatives in common. This is very useful in the different testing companies because it can help you place a person. Miles is my second cousin once removed, but he's a closer cousin to Lawrence. We share 1.28% DNA, while Lawrence shares 4.15% DNA with Miles. He's a first cousin once removed, meaning Miles shares a first cousin shares one grandparent with Lawrence. That would help me to figure out who Lawrence is and how he fits into my tree. We also get that ancestry composition, and it looks a little different. We'll talk about this at the end. It shows that 98.5% of my DNA is Northwestern European. Most of it, 71%, is British and Irish. 23% is French and German. This is probably how my great-grandfather Eichelberger fits in there. and some Finnish, and then 3.4% broadly Northwestern European, and then a little tiny bit down there that's Arab, Egyptian, and Levantine. I don't know where that comes from. So what do you get with MyHeritage? It's one of the newer ones, but it's become a much bigger company. At the beginning, they increased their match lists by letting people bring their DNA to MyHeritage and upload it. They no longer do that. You do have to test with them now. But because of that, they have a very robust match group to compare you to. I have brought my brother's DNA into MyHeritage. My sister tested at Ancestry, and we brought her DNA into MyHeritage, as well as my aunt. We brought her DNA into MyHeritage. And then Linda is another relative of ours. So what do you see here? You see their possible relationship. You see the amount of DNA they're shared. This time with MyHeritage, they show you the percent as well as the centimorgans that you share. It tells you the number of shared segments and the size of the longest segment. Those are things that as you get deeper into doing DNA analysis might be important to you, but are not going to be needed for you to get started with your DNA. Let's look down here at Linda. She is predicted to be a third cousin. Linda shares 123 centimorgans with me, about 1.7%, over 5 different segments. There is a theory of family relativity that MyHeritage has created for her based on a shared name of Way. So here she is looking at the two of us, and down here you'll see their suggested family relativity. So here's me and here's Linda. Here are our parents, our grandparents, our great-grandparents, and our great-great-grandparents, who they suggest are our common ancestors through their 2 children. It also will give you other possible relationships. It says there's a 47% probability that we are third cousins, but they could be wrong. They aren't wrong, but they could have been. And we might be half second cousins, which would be sharing our great-grandparents. I'm not sure what this parent's second cousin means, because that means we're third cousins and we would share great-great-grandparents. There's a small chance that we were second cousin and share great-grandparents, not half second cousins, just a little different. But this is where we do fall. In her family tree that she put in there is only one Way, but I have 4 different ancestors with the last name Way. And over on Ancestry, where I keep my DNA family tree, I have her fit in under Mary Evelyn Way. You also can look at shared DNA. So here's Linda, and here's me. If I look at my brother is a third cousin to Linda, my third cousin, fourth removed, Randa, is a 5th cousin or a 4th cousin to Linda. I could sort this, and we'll see this at another time, sorted by who's the closest relationship to Linda. And it might show up somebody that would help me determine who she is. We get ethnicity and estimates from MyHeritage DNA. This shows that I am primarily North and West European. Do you see the consistency? Even though they're not exact, they're all very similar. One of the things you also get from MyHeritage DNA is ethnic groups. And most of my ancestry on both my paternal and maternal side came through southern United States into Texas. So that shows on here. Ancestry DNA is one of the big guys. It has the largest database. What do you get? Well, it depends. They have different things. You are paying for a DNA test. It might be $39 on sale, or it might be the full $99 price. If you do not have a membership, you do get some things. You get ancestral regions, you get ancestral journeys, you get DNA matches, which is the important thing. You can contact those matches. You can compare your matches' DNA. You can get 3 traits. Those are things like can taste cilantro or not taste cilantro, or like cilantro. You can compare up to 3 traits. You can see you get all of those things if you have a Ancestry Family Tree membership or an Ancestry Family Tree membership with Pro Tools. And we're going to talk about that in just a little bit. What else is different? Well, with just buying that DNA test, you are limited to 24 custom groups. You can get up to 64 with the others. Shared matches. You only see 3 shared matches if you do not purchase one of the ancestry memberships. On the matches family trees, you can see if they have a family tree. You can see how big it is. If it has 1 person, some of them have 3 themselves and a mother and father, or whether it is public or private. But you can't see those matches family trees. The matches surnames match, and these other items down here, your surname matches, your birthplaces, the common ancestors in the matches family tree, through lines, which we'll look at, is only available if you have a paid membership in addition to your testing, and DNA inheritance testing. There are some advanced tools that are available through DNA testing with Pro Tools. This is included in your handout so you can see what is available with Ancestry. So what do you get with Ancestry? Well, you get matches again. Everybody will get this. This shows my daughter has tested with Ancestry. It shows our 50% shared DNA match at 3,479 centimorgans. It shows that she is a daughter, and it says both sides. Sometimes that concerns people. Well, my daughter is related to both sides of my DNA because she is related to my mother and my father as her grandparents. So she says both sides. My sister is here, and she is related to me on both sides. There is a public tree, fairly large, and there are common ancestors in that public tree between my sister, my daughter, and this is my aunt. This is another person who is suggested as a first cousin once removed. This person has no tree. And that might, if I didn't know who this was, I would have to use some of these other tools to figure out who they are. You have ways where you can assign different maternal, paternal lines. You can name them. You can make them by different ancestors. You can do a lot of different things. You can add in how they are related to you. This is one of my ancestry relatives, David. He's predicted to be a second cousin or a half first cousin one time removed. We share 292 centimorgans. The unweighted and longest segments aren't going to be very useful for you yet. But look at those predicted relationships. This person could be my second cousin, a half first cousin once removed, of a half first cousin, or a half second cousin. So it's got a lot of different possibilities, and it wants me to confirm that this person is a second cousin and that is correct. This is the tree that David has put into Ancestry. When you first submit your DNA, you're asked to enter a tree. The more you put in, the more you're going to get back. This is just 7 people, his parents and his grandparents, that he put in. But you'll notice over here it says common ancestor. The reason it says there is a common ancestor is because they look at all the trees and find these individuals, and they have predicted that we are related through a common ancestor, which is true. Through Ancestry, we get origins, which is our DNA, our ethnicity. You'll see it's a little more specific here. I have 26% Central Scotland or Northern Ireland. I have 16% Northern Wales and Northwest England. I have some very little bits of specific parts of Ireland or Wales. And I have some Germanic down there. And my Sweden is only 3%. If you buy or purchase a program with them, if you pay for in addition to buying your DNA kit, you will get through lines. And you may have heard about through lines. Through lines are by telling you by ancestor who else is related to that person. These are my different ancestors that are in my tree. And here is one of my ancestors, Frederick G. Eaglebarger. There are 12 DNA matches to Frederick G. Eaglebarger. They are through my great-grandfather, Perry Ross Eaglebarger, but they are also through his brothers, John Martin Eaglebarger and Charles Eaglebarger. There are 7 DNA matches, and they would look like this, showing how they are related through Charles. And there are 3 DNA matches through John. Now, the matches are truly matches. The relationships are in here based on what people have put in their trees. If it looks very solid, it will say something like this, where it will actually give the ancestor. If it is not so solid, it will have a little green box around it. It will have the name, and it will say evaluate. That means you need to do a little research to make sure that that's truly how you are related to the person that shows through the through lines. If there are lots of errors where lots of people have the same incorrect person listed, then these through lines might not be correct. Also, with your shared DNA, you get shared matches. So here is a relative of mine that we called BA. That's all that he has put in. We share 41 centimorgans across two segments. I sorted this by BA's closest relationships. And this shows that there's somebody else named BA who is his brother. Maybe the first BA is Bill and the second BA is Bob, but they share 2,603 centimorgans with each other. But the second BA only shares 14 centimorgans with me. Their next closest relationship to the BA I'm looking at is a lady who looks to be either B's grandmother or aunt and shares 2,030 centimorgans with BA. She is my third cousin on my father's side. This makes it easier because I can more easily figure out who my third cousin is, and then from there, I can figure out who BA or how BA may be related to me. Why are all these ethnicities different? Well, ethnicities are just predictions. There are many people who just take a DNA test because they want to find out their ethnicity or where they're from. You will look at them and they will not have come on for months or years. They found out what their ethnicity was, and that's all they're interested in. They are different because they are predictions. They are a deep dive into how you are related to all these different people by where they are from, but they are based on people who are living today. So the base populations that are used by the different companies to come up with these ethnicities are different. They all have their own proprietary base population. People migrated. They migrated from one place that was close, like England, to Ireland. They may have migrated from France to Germany. So you may get a little different ethnicity because it is all deep ancestry. What if you're missing an ancestry, such as American Indian? We get asked that a lot. Well, if you remember, we talked about how much you're related. Say you're only related to your grandparents by 25%, your great-grandparents by about 12.5%. That means there's 80 some odd percent of your great-grandparents' DNA that is not passed down to you. And that just might be their American Indian grandparent. These are all of my DNA estimates. You'll see that they are all different. They are all very similar, and they're nothing to get too excited about. How is this ethnicity useful for you? Well, if you have an ancestor, if you're looking for, say, an unknown parent, and all of a sudden when you do your ancestry, you find that you have a lot of ancestors from Italy. And and you know who your mother is, and her descendants or ancestors were not from Italy, then maybe you're looking for an Italian father. So there are ways that this ethnicity can be useful to help you determine how people are related to you, what line they're related to you on, and who they might be. So who should you test? You should test your oldest relatives. You saw how you get less and less DNA as it goes back. When I look at my maternal side, I use my aunt's DNA. My mother passed away long before DNA was something that we did, but her sister, my aunt, is the oldest relative that I could test on that side. And so I use her to compare to. You should test as many as you can afford, depending on what you want to do, and test in as many companies as you can afford. If you're looking for an unknown parent or grandparent, you may want to test at a number of companies because everybody does not test at all of the companies, and your one important match might not be at the company you test at. They might be at another company. So what kind of strategy would I suggest? Ancestry is the largest. They have the most results. They do not accept any DNA upload from any other company. And they are really, I suggest, is the best company to start with. After you've tested at Ancestry, you can transfer that DNA to Family Tree DNA. You don't have to test at both companies to get the results from both companies. And for that $19, you can get the upgraded results from Family Tree DNA. Then, if you want to expand your research, I'd suggest you go to either MyHeritage or 23andMe. 23andMe has had some interesting financial and ownership problems. MyHeritage is more stable at this point. There is another company we didn't really talk about, and that's called Living DNA. And Living DNA is very heavy on British Isles research. So if you think that you may quickly go back to the British Isles, you might want to test at Living DNA. And if you're looking for your paternal line, you should consider Y-DNA testing. Let's look at some of the cautions you need to be aware of. DNA isn't wrong. It's science, but it can be misinterpreted. You saw all those possible relationships for some of the smaller amounts of shared DNA. And by smaller, I mean under 100 centimorgans. Don't jump to conclusions that someone is your half-sibling when they have the amount of DNA that could be your half-sibling, but they could also be your grandparent, your aunt, uncle, a niece or nephew, or a grandchild. So you have to look at their age, what generation they're in, and do other research to find out how someone is actually related to you. There's not, even if the company says, we think it's your second cousin, you need to do some work to make sure of that. You need to know that you may learn unsettling information. It may not be an unknown parent, but it might be an unknown or a misinterpreted grandparent or great-grandparent. You may have missing ethnicity, and that doesn't mean that you're not genealogically descended from that ethnicity. The likelihood of inheriting DNA from a particular ancestor decreases with each generation. I hope some of you remember the Ancestry commercials where the man is wearing his Lederhosen and all of a sudden decides that takes his test and finds out that he is from Ireland and switches to kilts. You'll have different DNA matches than your siblings or cousins. So it's good if a lot of people test. My sister and I and brother do not have all the same shared matches. And looking at all of our results allows me to broaden the number of people that are still related to me, even though they're not DNA relatives. That is my introduction to DNA. I hope hope it demystified some of the things that you might want to know about your DNA. And now I'm ready for questions.
That was really great. We do have lots of questions. I think it was very thorough. There was just so much you covered in that presentation. We really appreciate it.
Thank
So
you.
the first question we got really early on was somebody wanted to know what happened to their DNA after they received the results. And I'm assuming that has something to do with maybe like their sample that they send. Maybe that's what they were getting at.
Well, I don't know. Their ethnicity results should still be there. And even if they don't, with most of your companies, once you've, except for family or ancestry, once you've paid for your DNA, as long as you remember what your password is and what your username is, then you can go back and look at your ethnicity at any time. Now, I talked about that group, the reference group. What all of the companies do is they are constantly adding people to their reference groups. So every once in a while, they'll say, we've refined our DNA, and you will get a new DNA or grouping, saying what your ethnicity is. Now, it doesn't tend to be big changes. When they first started doing this and we first started having DNA, sometimes there were some big changes. People lost all their Scandinavian DNA because Ancestry originally had a lot of people in their reference sample who were Scandinavian. And so most of us had a lot of Scandinavian in our ethnicity. And that has gone away for many of us. So that might be what they were asking.
Thank you for the explanation. So more than one person asked that they were going to get a copy of the slides. It's not what you we had offered in the beginning, but there was a lot of information in those slides. And if not, that's fine too, but they did ask.
I don't well, I could share the slides with you. They would only be available for about a month. It does make it difficult to give a talk again if everybody has a copy of your slides.
I get that. I get that. That is up to your discretion. If you decide to, you can email them to us and we can get them to the participants.
I tried to include most of this in the handout, and I included a lot of links to things, including some excellent books that you can get at your library or you can purchase.
Ooh, libraries. Yeah.
Libraries.
Yeah, that's it. I wouldn't have asked it, but several people did ask the question. So, that's what the crowd's asking. I got to ask the question for them. Somebody asked if you can explain the removed part again for cousins. I don't understand the removed cousins. Are they linked to great-grandparents or great-great-great-grandparent level?
Okay. Removed really means a difference in generations. You and your sister have children. You are the same generation and you are siblings. Your sister has a child and you have a child. They are first cousins. They are the same generation. But maybe your sister is quite a bit older than you are, and she had her child earlier than you did. And her child's already grown up and has another child. So now you have a generational difference. Your child and your sister's grandchild are a generation apart and are first cousins once removed. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
I know it's confusing.
Yeah, it is. But I think that was a good explanation. This question, I think you did answer. Which company currently has the most DNA data with which to compare a sample with? And that was Ancestry.
Ancestry has the most.
If you could give just one piece of advice to someone curious about the DNA, what would it be?
Test your oldest relatives now. I did not test my aunt because she didn't live near me, and I wanted to test her with Ancestry, which is a spit test.
Mhm.
And she was in a home, and I didn't know how I could send a DNA test to her. And she passed away before I was able to test her. And I don't have anyone older than me on my father's side who has tested.
Yeah.
So test your oldest, it's all nice to get your own, but if you want to research your ancestry, test your oldest living ancestor on each of your parents' sides.
Great advice. The next question. For someone who's had genetic testing, what's the most common misinterpretation you see, and how can people avoid it?
I think a lot of it is just assuming that somebody, that predicted relationship is what they really are. And seeing something and just like, well, he's my second cousin. Well, he's got a different name. I don't know anybody. Well, maybe he's not your second cousin. Maybe he's related a little differently. And sometimes I think people get too quick to pick the suggested relationship.
Very good. And it's the next question kind of relates to that. It was talking about the through lines on ancestry. If
Mhm.
it doesn't say evaluate, no green lines, how confident are we in the relationship accuracy? Is it definitive?
It's never definitive because you're going to have to prove it yourself. And if what it shows matches with what you have found through documentary evidence, then it is probably right. There is always a chance that your great 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 grandparents put a different person's name as the father than who's really the father. And that can definitely mess up your through lines.
Yes, I can understand that. Next question. How accurate is the test for locating relatives from African American backgrounds?
Actually, I think African American, it's pretty good. It all depends on how many people have tested. And if, like, your Native American people in general are not testing in great numbers. And so it is not as good finding matches. Many African Americans have tested, and the information on the ethnicity information is going to be generally correct. It's by areas, it's going to be correct. It may not be down to the very country. It might, the larger the area, the more accurate your ethnicity is. If it says you're Asian, you're Asian. If it says that you are Laotian, that's going to be a little different. It depends on how many people they have who are Laotian to be in the population that they're comparing you to. And there's a lot of other countries that are pretty close to Laos.
Yeah, that's very true. This is going back to the very first question about the test sample. So they clarified, do they destroy the test sample, or and they don't sell it to any other company?
Oh gosh,
That's,
no.
yeah.
They don't they aren't going to sell your test sample to anybody. Some companies use your, like, 23andMe uses aggregate results for some medical studies. So it might say sample A has this variant, and they have reported that they have cancer. And they might use it that way. But no, the companies do not sell your physical DNA to anybody.
Great to know. And the last question, I think they just want to refresh about finding out about their mother's line if they're female. So it's a female asking the
Okay,
question.
mitochondrial DNA will autosomal DNA will find can be used to research your mother's line. It can be used to research any of your lines, your mother's, your father's, any of your grandparents. It does all of it. Mitochondrial DNA looks at the specific type of DNA that is only passed from from mothers to their children. So a grandmother's DNA is passed to her grandson, but stops there. Passed to the granddaughter, and then passed to the great granddaughter. But it doesn't change very often. So when you match somebody, you probably are going to never be able to figure out how you're related. It's most useful if you have two lines that you think are both descended from sisters, but you're not sure. And you test two women from those lines, and it's both their mother's lines, and they match, then that gives you more proof that they are descended from the same line. I have not done mtDNA because I haven't found, I kind of know my maternal line. I don't see any reason to spend the money to do it at this point.
Thank you.
Autosomal DNA is how I would do it.
Yeah, thank you for that clarification. I don't see any other open questions, but I did want to mention that you're coming back to us in March, March 24th.
I'm coming back in March, and I'm going to talk more about how you use those results that you get, how you can use, you'll look at some specific instances where you're trying to determine something, discover something from the results of your DNA, and how you can use that DNA to expand your family tree.
Excellent, excellent. So that program's called Starting Out with DNA, Using DNA to Expand Your Family Tree. It's going to be on Tuesday, March the 24th, and registration is already open on our website, hcplonline.org. So mark your calendars for that date. So everyone, please, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Please join us on Thursday when James Beidler comes and presents a program zigzagging through German church records. And you can register for that program on our website. And as a reminder, all three of our Genealogy Week performances were going to be recorded, and they're going to be available along with the handouts at hcplonline.org on the HCPL Universe page. And that's through February 28th. And this includes Peggy Jew's presentation from last night, and this program, and then James Beidler's from tomorrow evening. And if you could please take time to complete that quick survey after the credits. As I said, we use your input to choose topics just like the one from this evening for our virtual genealogy program. So we really appreciate the input you give us for that. So thank you much. So thanks again, Jamie. Look forward to seeing you again in March.
Thank you. And I hope some of you go out and get your DNA tested or look at your DNA a little different.
Yeah, we appreciate it. It's just been really so thorough, so fascinating. So we really appreciate your instruction. So to everyone else out there, have a great rest of your week. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.